everybody. Today I will talk about some of the heroic warriors from the Masters of the Universe. The first one to start the story with would be Fisto. Fisto is a heroic warrior who is known for his enormous metallic fist on his right arm. He comes with two swords. One is his vintage sword from his vintage counterpart, and then the 2000X sword, which is quite enormous and big in size, and it has his fist molded at the end of the handle. Now the sword can be stored at the back of him here as a sheet for it, and the armor is removable, so is the head. There is an extra head that he came with. This one represents his look from the 2000X series, cartoon series, and the other one doesn't have this little crown on top, which would represent him the way he looked as a vintage toy. This belt buckle that has a skull of a bull of some sort is removable, and also has some interesting details at the back where it has the little pouches as well. So Fisto is a known character due to the fact that he appeared in numerous He-Man comics, and he appeared in a few episodes of the Filmation series, and especially in the 2000X cartoon series, where he was represented as an actual brother of Man-at-Arms. But that was only discussed in that particular series. That was not the point or the idea in the Filmation cartoon. So he is an actual good counterpart to Jitsu from the Evil Warriors. And Jitsu was already discussed by me in one of the previous videos. So that would be Fisto. The next one in line would be Mossman. Mossman is represented here the way he looked in the 2000X cartoon series, but one of the features of the original figure was kept, the fact that he's covered in moss and that he has that mossy fresh scent, a pine scent. He came also with his vintage weapon, the wooden mace, and he came with two heads. This one right here represents him the way he looks in the 2000X series, while the secondary head represents his vintage head, which was practically Beastman's head, just repainted into green and flocked. There is two versions of this particular figure. This one is the regular version, and the variant is supposed to have Mossman ears of the Mossman flocked as well, which this one does not. He comes with the sash that goes around his body, and then at the end of that sash on the side here, he has a small knife and a pouch with seeds. He is the protector of animals, of course human beings and the plants, and his arch nemesis is Evil Seed, who is the complete opposite of him. Evil Seed likes to use weeds and other dangerous plants to cause trouble on Eternia. And Evil Seed was discussed by me, at least the 2000X version was discussed by me in one of my previous videos that talk about individual evil warriors, independent ones, who do not work for Skeletor. So that would be Mossman. The next one would be Clamchamp, who is also one of the vintage toys, and this is his updated look. He never appeared in any of the cartoon series, but he did appear in the comic books. He does exist as a vintage toy, and this is pretty much the same way he would look in the vintage line. In the 2000X toy line, he was not released as a figure, but he was released as a mini statue figure that has no articulation but looks like a figure. In this case, he was made to look like his 1980s counterpart, with some additions from his 2000X appearance as a statue. So he does come with his vintage weapon that has the red claws that would come out, but since the action feature was not built in, the button was kept and the looks of the weapon, but you would have to manually pull out the two claws that would be otherwise activated in the vintage toy by this red button right here. So when it's pressed, at least in the vintage toy, these claws would be spring-loaded and they would just come out and grab the enemy figure and just throw him out. But here, that feature was not built in, but it was just mimicked the way it was supposed to work. So that's one of his weapons he came with, and this is the secondary one, which resembles like a mini clamp of a sort. I'm not too impressed with the looks of it, but it can be stored in either of his hands. Clamchamp here has articulation like all the usual figures. The armor and the head are removable. However, he does have this ridiculous knapsack that's molded at the back of him, which also appeared on his mini statue in the 2000X series. I'm not really sure what's the point of this, but let's us assume that it would have had something to do with the action feature if it was built in. So, Clamchamp is known to be a bodyguard of the royal couple, meaning of the King Randor and Queen Marlena in the comics, and he had, as I already stated, he had numerous appearances in the comics rather than the cartoon series. So that would be the story of Clamchamp. This other character is just as interesting, and especially due to the fact that he has a very interesting color scheme. He's called Sy-klone, and he is the heroic warrior and the master of winds. He appeared in some episodes of the Filmation series, and also he appeared in 2000X cartoon series in numerous episodes of that show. He comes with his vintage weapon, which is this bright yellow shield. He also came with this particular attachment that can be also used as a shield in his hand, but it can also be used to sort of explain how he activates his wind power. This particular red piece did not come with the vintage toy, but something of this sort did come with the 2000X version of the Sy-klone. So this figure is practically a mix of the 2000X, a little bit of 2000X, and mostly that of the 80s figure molded together. Now, Sy-klone also has this satellite that's on his chest, so does the vintage figure as well, and the 2000X one, which does move when you slant him a bit or move him a bit. So it would move just like it did in the vintage figure, and he does have the usual articulation, and the head is removable. Now the only thing that's a little bit troublesome about this figure is the fact that when this shield is removed, there is some chipping of the shield and the paint of it, and it remains on the wrist of the arm. And unfortunately that only means that the shield was not painted very well, since the paint is able to chip off. But other than that, it's a pretty solid figure and represents very well and captures the looks of the well-known character. Now this other particular heroic warrior has an interesting history due to the fact that he appeared in all the cartoon series except the New Adventures, of course, and he is one of the earliest heroic warriors that work with He-Man to fight evil in Eternia, and he is practically a cyborg, half human, half robot. He has a mechanical neck, hence his name Mekaneck, and this is his vintage 1980s look, just updated. His action feature as the old toy was that when he was turned in the waist, the neck and the head would rise up, and practically his long neck is supposed to be used sort of as a spying feature, or also to scout from the distance and spot any enemies who may be around. So the other interesting thing about him is the action feature was not built into this figure, but instead was tried to be mimicked by including extra long pieces to make the neck long enough. But of course the head can be removed, and the head can be displayed on the figure itself without the neck piece, so that you can have him as if his neck went back in again. He came with his vintage weapon, which is this very bright yellow mechanical club, and his armor is removable, and he does have the articulation as most of the other figures do. And other than that, he did had appearances in the comics, and as I stated already, in Filmation cartoon series, and also in 2000X cartoon series as well, and the numerous comic books. He is a very similar sort of character to Extendar, except Extendar is just another cyborg who has extra extendable parts compared to Mekaneck, who only has the neck, while Extendar can extend his neck, arms, legs, and the waistline to make himself taller and bigger than he is. So, but more about Extendar in another video. So for the moment, this is the story of Mekaneck. The next one in line, actually the last one for this discussion today, would be Buzz. Buzz is a humanoid bee who come from the kingdom of Adrenos, where the bee men live. And he came with two types of weapons, one representing his battle axe from the 2000X cartoon series, which is quite a long one. And then he of course came with his vintage weapon, which is the short battle axe. He also came with a removable hat, just like his vintage figure, and it can be displayed with or without it. And aside from that, he has articulated wings that can move 360 degrees, and they can also be pointed upwards. And he also has these little extra arms built into it, kind of like the arms of Webstor from the classics. His feet are pretty much the same type of feet you would see in Whiplash and in Clawful, for example. And this pretty much captures his look as and the way he looked in the 80s toy line. Now, of course, the one thing that's not included here is his face and the head, the way he looked in the 2000 cartoon series, where he looked slightly different, with very long bee antennas. That particular head is actually available if one wants to display him in his 2000X appearance, with a certain number of other heads of other known characters, the way they looked in the 2000X series. And that can be, of course, bought separately. It had about 6 separate heads representing the characters as they appeared in the, as some of them appeared in the 2000X series. So there is a head of Grizzlor with a crown of a sword that he's wearing in that show, and there is also Buzz's head in it, and Clawful's, and Snout Spouts, even though he never showed up in the cartoon series, but he was built as a mini statue. And also there is a head of the Sy-klone as well, included in there. And of course the head of Roboto, because all these characters had slightly different faces in that cartoon series or in their statue form than the vintage ones look like. So aside from that, this figure, as I said, is very well made, and when I was a kid I used to actually display this figure, and as I do today as well, I like to display Mekaneck and Buzz together, because the very first comic book where I laid my eyes on them when I was just a boy was this mini comic book called The Masks of Power, or Masks of Evil. I can't remember the exact title. But anyway, in that particular mini comic book, He-Man asked Mekaneck and Buzz here to assist him to track down these little creatures who managed to discover these very powerful ancient masks that can, whoever wears them can cause a great deal of trouble and become very powerful overnight. So ever since I saw them together being displayed in that comic book, I always like to display them together, thinking that they go to these adventures together most of the time. So just like I would pair, let's say, Clawful and Webstor together as well, and usually pair up most of the characters. So anyway, this would be all I could tell you at this time about these particular heroic warriors. I do appreciate you guys taking a look at my video, and if you like what you see, then you can just by all means subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time with another new video where I would continue talking about the Masters of the Universe Classics. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Bye.